No, get down. What's my little cat doing? What's my little cat down? Oh, I can't believe it. Go. Hey, you, you're loud. We share around here. Oh. You dog, come here. Rick, Riggs, here. Down. Hello, Paul. I am now going to add my camera. And how are you?
I was I was just turning my microphone on. Can you hear me?
Very loud and clear. Not
Okay.
too loud and clear. I just mean loud and clear. Excellent.
Okay.
I have a volume control for loudness, but when it doesn't get loud enough, it's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No one else has registered?
Well, there are another 8 people registered. But you know what? It was perfect last week with the three of us. It was a wonderful conversation. I've had very positive comments. Oh, what a pleasure. It was yoga for the mind.
Mhm.
I went, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, but sure, it is. You know what it means? It was like we were not pushing it, we were not stressing, but it was very, very pleasant. So it might be the two of us. I'm going to take a time to do the talk because I've prepared something, and then we'll have a discussion because I think it's a topic of considerable interest to both of us.
Right.
But I'm not going to, I'll wait till about 3:01, 3:02. There are always people who think the last minute is better than the second to last minute, or the minute after the last
Yes.
minute.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, what I do is I don't send out the reminder with the link until about less than an hour before. Because I know
Yes.
that many people, if you send it in the morning, then they go, you know what? Thought about it in the morning and I forgot all about it. So, but by the way, how many people looked at the replay page? Over 2,000.
All right. That's
So,
very good.
so that we don't get a big YouTube audience does not mean there isn't a big replay audience. Now, most of the replay audience just looked and read, but then there are, I don't know, 200 or 300, and the video will stay online. So over time, it may gain, if we hit a nerve, thousands of views.
Mhm.
So, and it's always there as a reference point. So it does look as if it's very likely only the two of us. I thought it would be lovely if Teresa joined us again, because last week it just was an interesting balance. You, me, and her, because we're such different people.
Mhm. I did invite one friend, but she certainly hasn't registered. I would have known if she had.
Okay. Well, she would
I,
certainly be welcome.
but I could imagine trying to encourage some people to join on another occasion.
It'll be every week. What I do is I send out, I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out Sunday or Monday the week at a glance so people can think of what is coming. And that's not random articles. Random articles just happen when they happen. This is, you know, set things. And the basic things are Thursday. No, Thursday was the rehearsal, but now that's closed. So I'm not going to be advertising that anymore. Friday and Saturday. I am surprised there are not more people who want to discuss because there are so many people who write to me. But what I'm going to do, because it is now 3:02, I am going to view just me and I'm going to mute you. I'm going to
Yep.
right now mute you, put it to just me, and then I'm going to
Yep.
record. And I printed out some of the stuff because I did quite a bit of writing. It's become my natural home, has become writing things. And, because you can come and go, you find your links and all that kind of stuff. Okay,
Okay, I'm going to turn my microphone off to save the
great.
battery.
Great. Well, that's very good because I was going to mute you. It'll be the same thing. So you turn your mic off and I'm muting you. Boom. Okay. So now I'm going to push view speaker, and then I'm going to go to over here where I know that there is record somewhere. Record. Oh, come on, dog. Here, 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 down. And the reason I'm doing that is down, down. Oh no, come here. Come here, dog. I'm just going to take your chain off because your chain is rattling against the plate which you are licking. So now I have the chain on the desk where it will not rattle and he can do what he likes. Okay, so now I will go and push record. Hello, this is Elsa with Thought Talk 3, nasty agendas. Now, some of those nasty agendas we know. It's somebody means to harm someone else. Somebody spreads lies about somebody else. Somebody hates or is jealous or wants to conquer the world or whatever it is. There are those openly nasty agendas. In the case of Reiner Fuellmich, the judge does not allow certain evidence which is so obviously admissible, not according to the judge. You go, nasty agenda. Okay, but that's really obvious. You just have to prove that nasty agenda is there. What I am more concerned about is, especially among ourselves, people with agendas they don't think of as nasty, that they don't even see that agenda, that they believe that they're on the side of the truth and they've got it right. And I'll say a case in point is somebody I only heard about on the 31st of December, John Pilger, journalist. He died. And I got several eulogies. The most loving one from Celia Farber. Now, she's somebody I respect very much. She did things like she broke the AIDS scam. She was standing out, speaking out about that when it happened against Fauci. So that meant that no mainstream career for her, way less money for her, or no money for her, etc. So she's somebody with a lot of integrity. So why am I mentioning all of this? And it is because my sense is that around John Pilger, she has a nasty agenda which is invisible to herself. She called her piece, or at the top of her piece is something like, what does it say? Oh, real journalists are agents of people. And then she even puts a link to a video he did on Cambodia. I went and I watched it. I had known about Cambodia. I hadn't known about John Pilger. I had never watched the video. I was impressed by the video. Okay, seems all really great. Except not long after, a day or two after, I got another piece from him. And this thing had a phrase in it, which in about 2 lines, I was like, what's going on here? It referred to Palestine as if an open air prison. Not quite, it is an open air prison, but as if an open air prison. And that's one of those things that just, I go, something's going on here. How is or isn't Palestine or Gaza or whatever you want to call it, an open air prison? Well, a lot of people from Gaza were crossing over to Israel and murdering Israelis. Well, eventually Israel built a wall and you had to show papers and stuff to get into Israel. It stands to reason to me to do that. I mean, when I was a kid, almost nobody locked their door. Why? Because nobody on my street, as far as I knew, ever got robbed. In other words, there was a lock, people owned keys, but using it was optional. That's not the case now. And I don't go when I lock my door, oh, the world is an open air prison because I'm locking up my home and somebody needs a key to be able to get into it. So to me, if somebody doesn't recognize the reason for that wall, that security, I go, there is a nasty agenda here that's not looking at, oh yeah, and then it's brought up, it's almost like apartheid in South Africa. Well, that was really different. That had to do with race, and that had to do with Blacks could not live in white areas, and even coloreds couldn't live in white areas. The apartheid system was really different. In Israel, there are lots of Muslims here, there, everywhere. And there's no locking them up. There is no security checks for those that are living in Israel. And sometimes that can also be dangerous to Israelis or Jewish Israelis. But all of that smacks to me of a nasty agenda. And there's even stuff like I was reading and it was saying how humiliating it is for people from Gaza to have to undergo all of this. Well, I go, well, they worked at lessening the threat danger so that, you know, that they worked against the fact that there were people dangerous to Israelis in Gaza. Well, then you could go, well, look, there hasn't been a terrorist in Gaza for 5 years. Get rid of that stupid wall. It isn't necessary. But instead, in fact, the wall is kind of used as, well, that's one of the many reasons why they hate Israel. So that is a nasty agenda. And I can even ask myself, what's going on in really nice, caring people with integrity? And there I go to the other thing, PSYOP. There's something that controls their mind, that has got their minds in control. And I will say that's even Celia Farber, who has told me that she spoke out about the disproportionate number of Muslim rapes in Sweden and lost all of her left-leaning Swedish friends over that little bit of truth. So I would just say they've been more PSYOP than she has. That's a nasty agenda. I got nasty agendas on something else the other day. I included a video from Bill Warner among some other videos I sent out. And core to that video, the 1 or 2,000, I can't remember how many, battles by Islamics against Christians, Hindus, those two groups especially, in contrast to the itsy bitsy tiny number of Crusader battles. I believe it was 6, may even have been 5, but anyhow, incredibly small. And yet, before I watched that video, I knew about the Crusader battles and didn't have a clue about the Islamic ones. Okay, should be a very uncontroversial video. But no, I got somebody very angry. Bill Warner does not accept that it was an inside job. He believes that stupid story about 19 hijackers. Clearly, the whole thing is a piece of garbage. Well, it seems like this person doesn't want to consider the rest of the video. And I will say I've actually had a back and forth with Bill Warner. At the time, I only knew about the Bombs Did It inside job story before I knew about Judy Woods. And his reply was actually incredibly interesting and thoughtful. He couldn't buy the bombs in buildings story because he said we haven't had any whistleblowers. And if there had been lots of people putting bombs in over months in all the elevator shafts and everything, there would have been whistleblowers. If not before it happened, then after somebody's wife, girlfriend, somebody's buddy that somebody spilled the beans to. But there hasn't been any whistleblower going, yes, that's what happened. My buddy worked on it. I mean, most humans are kind of a chatty bunch. Otherwise, you'd have to go that these people were, I don't know, locked up somewhere, quarantined. They came and they worked. And when they were finished their work, they were shipped back to wherever they came from. I have no idea about this. But anyway, so I thought that Bill had done more thinking than this person did. So anyhow, so I want to talk about nasty kind of invisible agendas. And we can spot them in ourselves if we're willing to notice when we have a hissy fit or an angry or an irrational response. If somebody says to us, that doesn't make sense, that does not follow that. So those are my main thoughts on nasty agendas. And by the way, these can be incredibly dangerous. They split us off from knowing reality. And by the way, in terms of these nasty agendas, I want to thank Paul Gregory, who's going to be here very, very soon, for really giving me the lowdown on John Pilger. Because yes, a couple of days later, I found out about his comments on Palestinians. But then on February 5th or so, he sent me an article with pieces bolded, and that was on somebody calling John Pilger a charlatan and fraudster, somebody who for decades had lied and lied and lied, especially by omission. So it wasn't somebody who just slipped up or tiptoed past one little tiny bit of untruth that was inconvenient, but that if you looked at what John Pilger was reporting on, you saw that he portrayed one story and something very, very different was happening, that what he excluded was absolutely enormous. And it all had to do with, is communism nice? In which case it's included. Is communism nasty? In which case it's excluded. Are the Vietnamese communists nice? Then it's included. Nasty, they're excluded. So there is a really strong bias. And I'm going to be attaching that article and what you can read. I don't think I need to read it for you. It's just year after year after year. Maybe you, Paul, would want to bring up some of the worst of the things that he said. I don't know if I have some of them here. Oh God, like, yes, this person, Oliver Cam, was really, really not happy. John Pilger was not really an investigative journalist at all, for he never did. Whoop. Hi, I'll talk to you later, okay, in about an hour. Bye. He was not really an investigative journalist at all because he never did any investigation, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I'm going to skip that because I think it is about time that we went over to having a discussion, Paul and myself, on these biases and how we feel about them and what we're doing about them and how do we get the agendas to be known by people, by just people in general. Some people who are really closed to knowing, okay, they can stay closed. But the thing is, in general, I saw 6 or 8 adoring eulogies to John Pilger. And only this one that Paul Gregory found somehow was a little bit on the critical side, or a lot on the critical side. So I want to say, welcome, Paul. I'd like to now open it to yourself as well as myself. And then what we will do is see what you have to say about this, as well as me, because I'm certainly going to continue talking. Okay, Paul, would you unmute yourself, please? You'll have to unmute yourself, lower left corner. You're still mute. It's the lower left corner, that little microphone sign.
How is it now?
It's
How is it now?
brilliant. It's brilliant.
Okay. Yes. Yes, I think that article you mentioned came from Quillette. And
Yes, it
Quillette
did.
is yes, it's based in Australia, and it has a paywall. It's not entirely. There are some things you can read free. I read that one free, but it has a paywall otherwise, and it seems to be really directed at people in the academic world. Yes, what occurs to me is that there are many journalists now. I mean, it's very difficult, as I'm sure, so well as Sylvia certainly can testify. It's very difficult to actually make a living as a genuine journalist. And what now happens is that many journalists are sort of on the borderline of being public relations people, PR people. And a public relations person has an agenda. They are being paid in order to, to put a company, corporation, whatever, in a favorable light. And so, of course, they have to suppress unfavorable information, or if they mention it, they mention it in a rather biased way. More or less, this can't be so important. That's what occurs to me there. And what is absolutely essential, whether you're a historian or whether you are a genuine journalist, is the truth. And the truth is also equally important, obviously, in a court of law. There has to be this commitment to being truthful, and you have to there's a discipline, and you say these are the relevant facts as far as I can make them out, and now I wish to pass judgment on these facts, and you can do that, but you do it separately.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not so convenient. I'm remembering the first bit of doctoral research I did, I had this thing called a hypothesis, which is very good because I hadn't done any research. So I had a hypothesis. I went out and did 12 qualitative interviews, which for a qualitative study, 3 hours interview with these 12 people, that's enough. You can get findings. And unfortunately for me, I got some uncomfortable findings. My hypothesis was confirmed. Stage 1, 2, 3. Unfortunately, stage 3 became stage 5, and in between there was a stage 4, 3, and 4 before we got to that. And that I hadn't had a clue about, but 9 out of my 12 people had gone through those stages. So I had 2 options. I could say, there I was so brilliant with my hypothesis, and all 12 of my people went through stages 1, 2, and what I had thought was 3. And indeed, all 12 of them did. But that would have meant leaving out that 9, 3/4 of the 12 had something I wasn't expecting. So I went and I admitted it. And it's incredibly important for identity politics, because I was interested in the impact of getting involved in a rights movement, in this case, specifically women getting involved with feminism. What happened? My hypothesis was just that, something would jar you out of the everyday. You become somehow, you got really caught into it, and it becomes really important to you, center stage, and that the outcome is that you feel better about yourself, you get a fuller understanding of the world. You know, eureka, not quite heaven on earth. There is a problem. And that is when you, yes, you get, you know, jarred out of your everyday life somehow or other, you get fired or whatever it is, or you realize that, in my case, I had a degree in literature and I had never read a book by a woman. Like, hey, there are a few good women writers. But the third stage isn't just getting immersed. There's a general, often anger at the system, at men, at injustices in the past, and injustices in the current situation. So as much as there is in love with the new content, fabulous new perspective, there can be, I call it sunshine and thunderbolts. I hadn't expected the thunderbolts, and they can be really strong. And so I'm remembering a woman who said to me that, you know, from the experience that she had, after a year, her husband sat her down and said, you know, we're heading for a divorce. There's nothing I can do right. Everything I do, it's always wrong. I said, I admit it, I'm not always perfect. I come home and I've forgotten to buy the milk, or, you know, the baby cries in the night and I sleep through and you wake up, and, you know, whatever it is, you know, I'm not perfect, but you are going around night and day angry at me. And she had had a terrible experience in the past, a date rape, which came back to her at 34, mother of 2 young children. But it wasn't her husband, and her husband was supportive. And he said, I'm on your side. And that conversation shattered that anger. And it got her go, right, I married a really great man. He's not like those jerks when I was 14. Those jerks when I was 14, I could do anything horrible to them, I would. But this is not who is in front of me. And yes, I want my marriage to continue. And so she said that was like a huge revelation to her, shattering that. So she went through the sunshine and thunderbolts. And then my learning was that all the 9 women had often had something that broke the anger. So they tended not to stay in it. But if you interview more people, you may find that some stay in it forever, like Black Lives Matter, especially if you encourage people to stay in it, tell them they're right, tell them to hate the other group, they may stay in it. And so, but my 12 women, all of them had ended up, because I took people who'd been involved for a long time, feeling much better about themselves, much more better informed, and also more assertive and all kinds of good things. But anyhow, there I had a hypothesis, and I was going to let it be destroyed by reality. And I got it replaced by a much more complex reality. And I really appreciate that. And it's really helped me in terms of looking at the identity politics in the world. So with that, I'll throw it back to you and agendas.
I'm not sure I have anything to say. I understand. I agree with you. The traditional word for the behavior of that woman before the big conversation is nagging, and nagging is something which typically women do, right? Especially within a family, right, with the children.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was more than nagging, she was angry. And they had had a good marriage until she remembered, as like she's one of these persons who went from one stage, boom, breakthrough. She happened to watch a movie on date rape. She had forgotten the experience, repressed it in her mind. And then she watched this movie, one woman after another talking about a date rape. And she remembered the situation of being given a lift at 14 and getting raped by several of her brother's friends. So it was pretty damn horrible. And you can understand why it was so horrible she forgot about it for 20 years. And then what came out was not that she began to just nag. You might hear nagging, but it was angry that she woke up sure her husband was going to do something wrong. Like she might have nagged at him every now and then beforehand in a good-natured way. Hey, come on, where's the milk? But now it was, you forgot the milk again, you selfish, whatever it is. So, but to bring it back to agendas, have you had any experiences around nasty agendas in your own life? Have you had a nasty agenda? Have you ever been caught yourself in an agenda and then later on went, oh my God, I
This
don't know
word,
why I believe that.
um, this word agenda in this meaning, this is new to me. I think it's been doing the rounds now for a few years, but it's not a word which people were using in this meaning, in this sense, if you go back 10, 20, 30 years.
Hmm.
So I haven't thought of things in those terms. I've been I've made lots of misjudgments, of course, and I realize now that I was being manipulated, that I was being gullible, and you know that I took things on trust. Well, you know, you have to take some things on trust, and you know, this trust was abused. But that's a slightly different matter. I'm not sure I want to. I'm not sure that I can, at least not quickly, sort of classify things in terms of agendas. There, what I would say about agenda, though, coming back to the Black Lives Matter and to you know, these various movements which are about, you know, people identifying with a particular category of other people. What has been happening, and you know, it needs to be said for anyone who hasn't quite realised to this. What happens is that there are grants available, academic grants available, if you are going to provide some kind of analysis of, you know, racial prejudice, gender prejudice, um, or any you know, any of these things. But there aren't any grants available if you want to do something else, right? So the chances are that today, Elsa, if you were doing that PhD again, you would not get the money. You would not get a grant to be able to pursue it. Right, but you would get a grant if you wanted to bang the drum for wicked white men.
Mhm. I wasn't getting funded. Uh, Getting a PhD in Canada is incredibly cheap, or anyhow it used to be. It peanuts. It was like $100 a year and maybe $400 for the thesis. It was like in Canada the cost went down from BA, which was like $600 a semester at McGill, the top rated university at the time, and then it went down to maybe $300 for the MA level too. Like the PhD was almost free. On the other hand, afterwards, I did apply for a postdoctoral scholarship to do more research on this. And I did my proposal, which was on the multiple stages. I wanted to go further on it. One person gave it, let's say, a 6. And if I had 3 6s, I think I would have gotten it. So these people had high standards. And then the second person gave it a 9. Person wanted to get it. All I needed from the third person was a 4, and I would have gotten the grant. The person gave me a 2. So that may have been someone who, looking at my thesis, my postdoc proposal, wanting to go further and looking at these stages, was very angry at what I was proposing to look at. Someone who believed that there was no middle anger stage, or who believed the middle anger stage was totally justified and everyone should stay there forever. Anyhow, that person scuttled my postdoc. So that was, I can't remember, it was 30 or $60,000. Anyhow, a really nice sum of money, which would have been lovely to spend a year going further with pay. As I said, it wasn't a disaster not doing it, because Canada is so generous in terms of funding education. By the way, I like that PhDs cost almost nothing, because by that time you really your work is really doing that research. But in terms of what is funded in agendas with Black Lives Matter, one of the most brilliant movies I've seen on agendas was on the first of the cases which led to Black Lives Matter. It's by Joel Gilbert, the Trayvon Martin hoax. The myth is lots of nasty white men beat up little blacks. The reality was angry, big, hulking adolescent male almost murders Hispanic male. Suddenly the Hispanic was white. And there are photos of this Hispanic guy with a bloody head and bruised and everything. And he was even on the phone with the police at the time, etc. None of this was taken into account in the court date. And I believe Al Sharpton was part of it, but I can no longer remember. Brilliant movie, by the way. Now, those were people who were using this with a nasty agenda, an all-out evil agenda. They wanted to sell race hatred, and they did. I think, in fact, my guess is that I don't know if there was absolutely no incident of what they were looking for. Big, nasty white guy is mean to little black boy or girl. Because if this is the best they could do, it was really pathetic. And in terms of its being a hoax, the way they could even get it to trial the girlfriend of the black kid who got killed by one single shot of this guy who was pinned to the ground with his head being bashed on the cement. He took out his gun and he shot the black kid with one shot that was trying to kill him. And he was not even intending at all. He was just trying to survive. Anyhow, they needed the girlfriend to testify to a story of something other than what happened. And she wouldn't testify. So what they did is they found another black woman who was a slow learner, and they got her to pretend to be the girlfriend. And so the whole thing was a hoax. And by the way, this came out afterwards and nobody was criminally charged. So it's just an incredible thing. Now, those are people with pure bad agendas. The people who got sucked into it, the many blacks hating whites and the many whites into self-hatred, those were people with the, what I call more innocent agenda. Like they're sucked into somebody else's psyop, mind game, mind control. And that's what I also think. I don't know about John Pilger, how much he was sucked in, that he wasn't even aware of what he was doing. He was just so sure he was right. I don't believe he was like the people who set up Black Lives Matter. But he still bears a lot of responsibility. He bears responsibility for what he did. So, and I'll throw it back to you. By the way, if you don't want to use agenda, what would you use if you buy the climate hoax or something? That you are mind controlled, you are psyop. When it happens to us, we are psyop. Somebody's doing a psyop on us. If I'm telling a story and I want you to believe something, then I have an agenda. By the way, kids have agendas all the time. If a kid wants to stay out late, then the kid may say something like, Mom, everybody's going to the movie at 8 o'clock. It's the new Star Wars movie. The big show is at 8. Everyone's going on 8, and it's only out at 11. Everyone's going. That kid has an agenda. They want to go with their classmates. This is not an innocent thing. chances are half the kids are pulling the same stunt on their parents. Some of the parents will say, no, I've already told you, you don't stay out till 11. The other half of the parents may either be very easygoing or like trust the kid or whatever. So does how I'm using the word agenda make sense to you, Paul?
Well, it's classical deceit. And
Mhm.
and sometimes in life you do actually have to lie. I'd like to go in a slightly different direction. I was thinking about peer review, and what happens there also is that there are a lot of people who seem to have an agenda. We've seen this in the way in which uh, serious scientific academic articles explaining about the harm done by mask wearing or the harm done by the vaccinations and so on and so forth have been suppressed under peer review. Um,
Absolutely.
right, and I've had also the experience myself. I was in the so-called business ethics movement for a very long time, from the very beginning, in fact. And a couple of years ago, I submitted an essay. It was actually an old essay which I'd forgotten about. And I submitted it to the leading journal for business ethics in the world. It was very complicated because, well, it would have been complicated because for all the submissions these days, you have to go through bizarre procedures, all right, about anonymity and this, that, and the other, which were completely irrelevant to me because, at my age, I wasn't on a career. I wasn't trying to build a career or anything. Anyway, so I sent this in, and the next day I got a reply from the editor, and he simply refused to send it out for peer review. He admitted that it was very well written, but of course the point was I was actually challenging the whole approach undertaken in business ethics, which is about having lots and lots of rules and complying. And I was saying, no, it's a matter of professional individual integrity. And that is the only way. And you just forget all of these rules. Or if you keep those rules, you have to have different sets of rules for people with different propensities. We do not need a rule about not shoplifting if it never occurs to us to shoplift. Or if we're simply not very well equipped, which would be true of myself with my poor eyesight. Right? We don't need that rule, right? But we maybe need other rules. We maybe need a rule about not being greedy, all right? But you might also need to have a rule about standing up for yourself and not allowing others to take the cake, right? But you need different people need different sets of rules. And as soon as you have a set of rules which is meant to be universal, it has very adverse effects. For example, if the idea gets around, oh, there are lots and lots of date rapes, one effect of that will be that some men will hesitate to actually make a completely normal, harmless advance on a woman, sort of stroking her or giving her a quick kiss or whatever it may be. It is absolutely disastrous what is happening there in the public realm. And you have, and regularly in the United Kingdom, which I know the two countries I know best, United Kingdom and in Germany. In Germany, it's not so bad, but in the United Kingdom, it's absolutely dreadful. A member of Parliament has been called at court, or he's alleged sometimes years and years ago to have pinched somebody's bum. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, there may be occasions when you have to pinch someone's bum because that is actually just part of the petting in a certain context. You cannot have rules about these things. But what is being propagated, whether it's by peer review in the selection of articles or whether it's in the public domain in terms of moralizing, these are agendas which have nothing to do with a serious, complex examination of how things should be, and giving some kind of guidance to people who are all different.
One thing about the pinch on the bum 30 years ago, it may be that the cultural context was utterly different. Not that it's acceptable to do that to a woman, but that it was something being done generally, so that, men were not educated not to do it. Women were not educated to go, hey, quit doing that. So that, and then for it not to be brought up for 30 years, as opposed to then, it's like, I'm agreeing. What is going on there? You have to, and that's a different thing from there was a rape 30 years ago. This was a pinch on the bum, or it was some joke that was in the air at the time, that was being done left, right, and center. And that, yes, you can go back and say, no, those things should not have been happening. They made things, I'm remembering as a young woman, there are a lot of situations that were not that comfortable because, men were thinking that was funny. And if you said that's not funny, you don't have a sense of humor. So I kept not having a sense of humor, but I'm one of the who's kept talking, and it generally turned out okay. But if I wanted to, when I can't remember who said what, but if I 30 years or 50 years later said, by the way, you, Paul Gregory, when you were 20 years old, you said to me, and now I want to throw you in jail for the rest of your life. It just doesn't make any sense. By the way, I don't think we've ever seen each other. We've just met online through this kind of, because we both like thinking and we both like talking about thinking. So we're not talking about a real thing.
We're on different continents.
Different continents on top of that, yes. So there's no way this could have happened in real life unless energy and in dreams, but we're not going to go into the ethereal realms at this point. Yeah.
I mean, the pinch on the bum can be also just part of, if there's a relationship already exists, that might just be part of it.
Oh, if there's already a sexual relationship, if there's a boss-employee relationship, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
That would be part of, what might not have been recognized as sexual harassment, but would qualify as sexual harassment. And there were a couple of decades of a lot of educating of bosses regarding, and then it was also acknowledging that some female bosses who are generally, their stuff had been totally overlooked, might also be, coming up very close to some male coworkers and making them uncomfortable. So anyhow, long, complicated situation. But I think we agree that you can't, many years later, for whatever reason. And then in terms of agendas, I'm just thinking that Trump was ordered to pay some woman $85 million, not for anything that he did, because she alleged a rape and, that got thrown out and stuff. But afterwards, he said something which I believe hurt her feeling. And the court has, or whatever it was, the court, and I was thinking that court has an agenda, and then you have a legal system which is totally crazy, which goes that for hurting somebody's feelings, can that ever be worth $85 million? So you have the agenda in a legal system where it becomes incredibly punitive. And that was not the intent, to destroy people like Alex Jones from InfoWars, when he believed that Sandy Hooks was fake, and I believe it's turned out it wasn't fake, whatever. Anyhow, he got you have to pay $7 billion or
yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
was.
I mean, the situation there in the United States is absolutely absurd. It's quite arbitrary. What you need, if we're thinking now of a democracy, a genuine democracy, you need to have the possibility of calling out the judge in such a case, or even calling out the lawyer and saying, okay, we're now going to have a vote, not nationwide, but in your home county. We're going to have a vote in your home county. People are going to get all the information they need about the judgments you've made over the last several years. And people can then say, yes, they want you to continue in office as a judge, or they can say, no, you should be removed from that office. That is what a serious democratic system would look like. You don't. What I think is a mistake in some U.S. states, they actually vote for somebody to become a judge. Well, you can't. This doesn't really make sense. It's only in practice, all right, over the course of months and years, that a person can actually prove whether they have good assessment. I'm looking for another word for judgment,
Mhm.
of situations of character, and then you can say, yes, okay, your judgments are generally aligned with what we, as it were, the public think, or the informed public think. Right, but you now have the situation where judges, are coming up with absolutely outrageous uh, uh, judgments, in matters. Well, they don't seem to. These people don't seem to have any experience of life. They don't have any grasp of what is going on in society, and they are causing enormous damage, and basically they are destroying the justice system. Before you do that, you have to absolutely have got to introduce a system of deselection of judges, and not only judges, of others now, as we've seen, heads of police heads, right, of people in prominent political public office, which it might be, for example, somebody, the head of a hospital, which was glad to accept money in order to classify people with COVID, when what had happened was that they'd had a motorcycle accident.
Mhm.
Such people do not belong in public office, and that is the way to cope with it.
Mhm. In other words, yes, we need a way to cull. We needed a way to get the incompetence out. I'm seeing how the
Sorry, they're not incompetent. They're extremely competent. They are evil. They are bad.
okay, they're evil and they're bad. Yes, okay. Because I'm thinking about, I believe her name is Fannie Willis, evil bad, who paid her lover who was married something like $167,000 to do some kind of prosecuting when he had absolutely no experience. And it's something to do with prosecuting Trump, and the whole thing is the corruption, the agenda, the blatant out front agendas everybody has, and the non-accountability is just crazy. I'm also wondering about how the system has no caps on the craziness, so that you can award somebody $85 million for insulting somebody who claimed that you raped her and then you didn't, and that's been established or whatever, and then you're not even allowed to say something negative about her. Like, I never would have touched that bitch in my life, whatever. And you're not allowed to say that, because then you have to pay $85 million for making an angry comment at somebody who has made you go through a court. I mean, there's no upper limit on how much. And then $7 billion for believing Sandy Hook's. And I'm also thinking, how fragile are people supposed to be? Somebody thinks Sandy Hook's was fake. Okay, it was or wasn't fake. But are you so fragile that you immediately dissolve and need $7 billion to feel better?
What we don't have in society any longer is the concept of moral growth. And moral
Mm.
growth might, for example, involve realizing you get over it. So
Yeah.
I was very hurt that I was accused of this, that, or the other, or that somebody, as it were, described me as being, a dreadful person or whatever it was. No, you have to part of moral maturity is indeed simply to be able to take that. You've got to be able to take that on the chin, not worry about it, just go on with your life. And it's a grave moral fault in that case.
By the way, the good people are having to experience ever greater moral growth. So Reiner Fullmich has to endure the injustice system. Well, he can go to pieces under it, and even $100 billion wouldn't be enough, or he gets moral growth. He withstands that. He does not say, oh, it's such fun having handcuffs. He says it's torture. It twists my arms. It's unnecessary, and it's etc. But instead of going, I am humiliated, I in fact think that putting handcuffs on him humiliates the German judicial system. It does not humiliate the person it's done to. Um, so, I mean, if you live in a shame-based economy, then you might feel shame, but whatever it is, I don't feel he's ashamed of what's been done to him. From on the first day, from what I've heard, what he said, he's been pissed off at what is done to him. And so as opposed to shriveling and dying and needing $82 billion to survive the day, it's like he's saying, those people aren't after justice, they're just after money. So he's got the
Um,
moral growth.
what should have happened, and I wrote this to him, I sent a letter saying this, is what happened in Saudi Arabia a few years ago. A considerable number of princes, the Saudi aristocracy, as it were arrested and they were held in first-rate hotels. I'm not sure what happened afterwards, but they were, I mean, you were innocent until you were proven guilty. All right. So basically, in the case of Rainer Fulmich, if he is to be held at all, which is, we know completely absurd, but if he was to be held justly, then he would have to be held in a five-star hotel.
Appropriate
Huh?
for a top-notch lawyer.
Yeah.
But actually, the absurdity of many of the claims is just absurd. So they claim they cannot have the funds for an ankle bracelet for him, which would track him all the time and let him stay out of prison. So they don't have that money. But I'm pretty certain that keeping someone in jail is more expensive than getting an ankle bracelet for somebody. But that's the argument. But yes, I do like what the Saudis in that case chose to do while they were investigating. They were not treating the people in a way that was intended to humiliate. They were saying, as befits your station, this is where you are being kept, but you are under investigation, therefore, there's a security guard outside. Do you have any final thoughts on agendas? Any wrap them up thoughts on agendas?
No, but I would like to return to the idea of peer review and peers. And we have this idea of peers. So, for example, if a lawyer is thought to have committed wrongdoing of some sort, unprofessional conduct, right, then his behavior, his conduct has to be assessed and judged by other lawyers. And I say, no. No, it has to be judged by people who are not lawyers. You might have a committee of several people, and there may be a couple of lawyers among them. But his behavior, the behavior of the lawyer, should be judged by an architect, by a translator, by an educationalist, by a cobbler. And that is the kind of peer review you have. One problem we have now is that all of these so-called ethics committees have proven to be totally, utterly corrupt, mean-minded, and they have an agenda, which is to suppress anyone who has been speaking out against mask wearing or the vaccination or whatever it is. Those and I'm very angry about that, because I'm in favour of there being ethics committees, but genuine ethics committees, and they have to be staffed from people from diverse professions, and they have to be individuals who have some kind of experience in life, right? So you have people who have had the time, at any rate, to grow morally. As a young person, you might know all of the rules perfectly, but you may not. There are exceptions, but you are unlikely to actually have the character judgment which is needed and the assessment of the wider context.
I also then say I believe that people should be judged on an ethics test, an ethics test on how does one evaluate this and that? What is the role of facts, et cetera, because the people who are put on the committees are people who are on this mindset, so they are ready to throw somebody out of the medical profession. So we're having doctors losing their license through peer reviews. We're having Jordan Peterson having to take social media retraining, etc. And from the top of his profession, and he was thinking of throwing his license, and he really doesn't need his license. But the arrogance of these people, and then so I think that there needs to be a different test, and if you were into the ethics area, you might be a great person for how does one select people for an ethics board, for a peer review on something. So I'm in fact throwing it to you, like how would what are the standards? Because you might say a cobbler and a dentist and a nurse and a veterinarian. Okay, fine. But how would you assess that these 4 people have the right to be on an ethics committee?
Oh, Elsa, that's material for another hour.
Okay, yeah, I do believe it is, because I think it's really important.
No,
By the way, I'm an ethics prof. I taught ethics. I love ethics. Right and wrong, to me, it's a favorite thing. And so having an agenda, to me, you fail the ethics test. And so what I did when I had a hypothesis and the reality didn't fit, I would have been betraying myself if I'd stayed with the hypothesis. So, my material did show, but I just have to skip 1/3 of the material which didn't fit in there. So instead, I put it in, and I went on to do incredibly interesting research. And in fact, one of the things I found out is that our society was so looking outward, racism, incest, battering, looking outward on what this does. But there was nothing about looking inward at what does it do to be involved if you are a woman, if you're a person of non-white or white, if whatever sexual what does it do if you're either in the dominant, or what does it do to you when a movement like this is sweeping around your country? So in fact, just a moment, I need to get rid of this cat. I need you, sorry, cat. Yeah, I just she doesn't mean to do harm, but she's inappropriate. Not that her behavior is unethical, but it's non-ethical.
You could have people, being judged as arrogant. How about some kind of punishment for arrogance? And then, having said that, there are times when arrogance is justified. For example, you might defeat an arrogant person by being even more arrogant than they are.
Hmm. Or you might
Right?
just not, you might appear arrogant, but you're just not ready to, you know, be bowled over by their arrogance. Like they might have an arrogant demeanor and you just say, well, I see that that's your opinion. Unfortunately, it's got no bearing on the facts, but so be it.
Yeah.
This would be enough uh, for another discussion, but I want to tell you what we're going to talk about next week, which will be a continuation of agendas. There's somebody I've known for about a dozen years who has taken on a very unpopular viewpoint. His agenda is truth and reality. And what he has taken on is the anti-Anglo, anti-white, anti-European bias. His specific personal concern is anti-Anglo, the way anything relating to Anglos and those who have assimilated into Anglo culture is denigrated. And so he and a co-author, in fact, have written a book called Anglophobia. And one of his points of contention, and now this is not a bad agenda. By the way, a thing about a bad agenda is it tends to be secret, underhanded. It's not out in the open. So when I've said this before, when I was a kid and women got paid about half as much as my mother got paid half as much as the man beside her, nobody had this wasn't secret or furtive or underhanded. It was just, well, you know, a man's supposed to be earning most of the money. And my father's attitude was, well, I'd rather my wife brought home double the money rather than this little bit of money. I mean, why would I want my wife to be earning less rather than more? Which to me was a very sane thing for my father to believe. But what he is very open about is that it is time for whites to identify positively as whites, including as a voting bloc, as opposed to that whites are very likely to vote for the candidate and not realize that that candidate belonging to a minority bloc may not have their interests at heart. May or may not, so it depends. So anyway, his name is Harry Richardson. I think you will find him very interesting, Paul. Or do you already find him interesting without even having heard him?
I don't know this name, but I very much do know the theme. And it's one which we had a couple of weeks ago as well with Matt Ehret's attack on anything British, or indeed anything British or American. No, it's absolutely absurd, this attack on the English speaking peoples have done an enormous amount of good in the world through their ingenuity and above all through their what the politics that they used to have, which they no longer have now. And I'm deeply ashamed of what's happened the last 4 years. And I think there was a run up to those events with a gradual degradation, well, a gradual deterioration. Right? But if you go back in time, you do find that compared with other countries, the Anglo countries, right, that is to say, England, Canada, the United States, Australia, did remarkably well in terms of fundamental decencies. Not always, but by comparison with other nations, certainly with the Germans, but even with the French.
Well, I think you'll find next week interesting. Harry is not into denigrating any other culture. He's just saying the whites are discouraged from experiencing ourselves as part of an ethnic racial group and voting as a bloc. Instead, that if you do want, let's say, to have a country which has whatever, more than a half white population, you're considered racist. But you go to any non-white country, China, India, etc., you'll find it's very hard to emigrate in. So they're allowed to have a racial bias in immigration, but we are absolutely not supposed to. And I believe in Canada and British Columbia, the immigration was like 97.5% non-white that was allowed. And you just go, is that because that's who was applying? Or is it what a biased immigration board was allowing in? That basically, if you were white, skip it, you're not going to make it in. But for that, you'd have to see what were the racial groups, what was the education, et cetera, how well would they, fit with what was wanted, et cetera. And I don't believe that's been done. Anyway, if you have nothing else to say, I'm going to say come back next week and meet Harry Richardson.
Okay, right.
Great. Okay, so bye and see you next week.
Okay, bye-bye, Elsa.
Ooh, I have to cut the recording. Whoa, now, just a moment.